Welcome back to the Daily Dose. My name is Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Thank you to those of you who have already subscribed to the channel. Appreciate your support so much. Appreciate your support in the future. Thank you in advance for your future support. We want to grow this platform as big as we can, and you and I have a symbiotic relationship. I'm like that little fish that latches itself onto a shark, and I don't know what it does for the shark, but it does something. And the shark carries that little fish around to better ocean or, whatever sharks and fish are looking for. That's you and me. I'm that little fish that's latched on to you guys, and you guys are going to be able to take us to a bigger, better, brighter YouTube future. I can't do it without you. I don't know if this shark and fish thing really played. I kind of came up with it in real time as I was talking. And now that I'm saying it out loud, I probably should go back and start this recording again. But here we are. You're a shark. I'm a fish. I need you. Thank you for your support of the Daily Dose. Today, let's talk about recruiting once again. We've talked a bunch about the official visit weekend already. Some bad news, Roger Saleapaga, he could not make it down to Provo. I think he's headed somewhere else this weekend, and the BYU visit got pushed till later on in the calendar. And Nuku Mafi, he just couldn't make his schedules align with BYU. They were trying to make it happen before the dead period, but maybe it happens now closer to September. Everybody else is down there, including an additional transfer, a punter from the transfer portal who will be down there this weekend. So lots of names, lots of really, really big things going on, and it could be a very, very exciting weekend for BYU recruiting. But we're not going to talk about the exciting weekend that could be. We're going to talk about the players who are committed to BYU right now. One of the questions I get asked more than anything else is, hey, who does player X remind you of? What does he project like? What whose career can I look at and say this is who this recruit is going to be? Today, we're going to answer those questions. I'm going to give you what I think each BYU commit. I'm going to give you a high-end comparison and a low-end comparison based on what I see and what I think. And we're going to start with four-star tight end Reiner Swanson. At the high end, I think he becomes a lot like Johnny Harline. A lot of people want to say Dennis Pitta, and that's fair. I mean, I think that's where the ceiling is a Harline or a Pitta. I think he's a little bit more physical than Pitta was in college. That's why I kind of lean towards Harline. I think Harline was a little bit more physical, maybe not quite as dynamic as a receiver, but still plenty dynamic as a receiver. That's where I see Reiner Swanson. I think he's going to make his hay as a receiving tight end. He's a willing blocker, but he's a dynamic receiver, and I think that's where he ultimately ends up. On the low end, Kane Friel, they're very similar in the way that Swanson is shaped, same size, roughly the same weight. Kane got big as his career went on, but when Kane Friel arrived at BYU, he looked a lot like Reiner Swanson, and I think that's kind of the low-end comparison for where Swanson's career plays out. Number two, Sefa Brown out of Highland High School. I love Sefa Brown so much. I think he is criminally underrated in the state of Utah, and he has the ability to become an elite pass rusher at the college level. On the high end, I think he's Bronson Kafusi. He's a little bit shorter than Bronson was. I mean, Bronson was like Goliath out there on the defensive line. But Sefa Brown, in terms of his body figure and his body shape, is really similar. Bronson was kind of slender when he was at Timpview High School, and that's what Brown is at Highland. Now, obviously, Bronson Kafusi developed and turned into an NFL player. I think that's where Brown could go. I'm really excited about his future. Not as tall as Bronson, but I think in terms of the way he attacks the quarterback, the way he gets off the line of scrimmage, and where his body is today compared to where Bronson Kafusi was at Timpview, I think there's a lot of similarities there. On the low end, I see a little bit of J.J. Nwigwe. If you remember Nwigwe, his senior year playing defensive end, he played really well. Of course, he was an offensive lineman for a long time, but I do think that Sefa Brown on the low end could be that senior version of J.J. Nwigwe in terms of a pass rusher. J.J. was good. J.J. was very good. He didn't get to do it for very long at that position, but he was very effective when he was on the field. Number three, Dallin Johnson, defensive tackle out of Springville High School. On the high end, I see Tomasi Laulile. They are just bullies. Laulile was a bully. Dallin Johnson is a bully. Physical, strong, just wants to pick up an offensive lineman and simply move them from one side of the field to the other so that they can go about their business. Dallin Johnson has that capability, just like Laulile did. I also think he's a pretty exceptional athlete for his size. kind of how Laulile was. On the low end, I see Dallin Johnson's career, maybe Zoe Fauatea. Obviously, Zoe's my guy. Zoe was riddled by injuries throughout his career, and it ultimately derailed his progress. I think that Dallin Johnson on the low end, Zoe Fauatea is a pretty fair comparison in terms of how they project. Number 4, Adney Reed. On the high end, Alani Fua. It's easy. Everybody who has seen Adney Reed play sees Alani Fua. He's up to 6'5", about 215 pounds. He could come off the edge. He's explosive as a linebacker. I think we have a misconception that maybe he has to be a hand in the dirt, traditional defensive end, and I don't think that's the case at all, especially in the modern era of college football. I think he's a rush edge guy that he can play coverage, but he could just beat you off the line of scrimmage with his speed. He'll get bigger. He'll continue to get bigger. Ultimately, I think he plays at 235, maybe 240, but he's so fast. It just reminds me so much of Alani Fua. On the low end, Morgan Unga. If you remember Morgan Unga, he didn't get after the pass rush, he didn't pass rush, didn't get after the quarterback as much, played a little bit more coverage, but in terms of what he played like, how he played, his physicality, I think that's a pretty fair low-end comparison for Adney Reed. Number 5, quarterback, Enoch Watson out of Queen Creek, Arizona. On the high end, I see Brandon Doman. I think that Watson maybe has a little bit more arm talent than Doman did as a young freshman quarterback early in his career. Obviously, Doman developed and he made it to the NFL. He was drafted. He was great. When we think of Doman and we look back at his highlights, we have a tendency to view him as an option quarterback because that's what he did. But the guy could throw the football too. If he was playing in any other version of BYU's offense, he would have been effective. He was a very, very good quarterback. And when I see Enoch Watson, I see a lot of those capabilities. He's a dynamic athlete. We don't talk enough about his athleticism. And he's a pretty accurate passer. He maybe lacks a little bit in arm strength, but he's an accurate passer. He can make the throws that he needs to do. And he's a special athlete with the ball in his hands. That sounds like Brandon Doman to me. On the low end, Bo Hodge. Bo Hodge maybe has Enoch Watson beat in arm strength, but everything else, I think from a raw talent capability, that's a pretty fair comparison to me. Of course, Bo Hodge, his career wasn't great at BYU, but he was a special athlete, and when he got onto the field, he did some good things as well. And finally, Thomas Process, the safety out of Arizona, out of Basha High School. On the high end, I see Craig Bills. Other people have compared him to some of BYU's bigger safeties in the past, like Danny Sorensen or Andrew Rich. I don't know that he's quite that big and physical on every play. Now, don't get me wrong. Craig Bills was physical. He could hit as hard as anybody that I can remember in BYU history. But he wasn't the kind of safety that was constantly getting up to the line of scrimmage, taking on offensive linemen in the second level, helping in the run game. He was a true free safety that played in the back end of things, and he punished receivers who went over the middle, and he was an effective tackler, but he wasn't known for being that big brute safety that comes up in run coverage like Andrew Rich or Danny Sorensen was. And I think that's where where he fits. I don't think that ultimately he is quite that physical guy like Andrew Rich. On the low end, I see Hayden Livingston. It's not the sexiest name out there, the walk-on from Idaho, but Hayden Livingston has quietly put together a very good career from the safety spot, especially as a walk-on, and I think that's where Thomas Process ultimately could end up. We will do more of these high-end, low-end comparisons as more commitments are added to the board, but for right now, these are the 6 that we're talking about, and this is where I think things could go for these guys. BYU's got a strong foundation of a recruiting class, and hopefully this weekend is a strong step towards building on this foundation that exists today. Thank you so much for your support of the channel. And until next time, give them hell.